This is So Life Wants You Dead, a show that explores the intersection of illness, disability, healing, and creativity. 7 years ago, I was told I would need an emergency organ transplant. Before they put me under, I closed my eyes and imagined myself writing. Now, all these years later, I can say that was honestly what saved me. Well, that and a brand new liver. I'm Nora Logan, and this is a podcast on how looking at death helps you live. Today, my guest is Alexa Wilding, a published writer, musician, and mum of two whose experience with cancer and caregiving has both built community and informed her creative life. We talk about what it's like to be a caregiver, her own experience of breast cancer, what it's like to write about all of it, and how to reframe resilience. Here's the conversation. Hello and welcome to So Life Wants You Dead. Thank you so much for being here today, Alexa. It's so good to see you and to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Oh, juggling a lot of things per usual. I don't really know the answer to that question anymore. I think for all of us, it's like if you actually say how you are, you definitely lose friends and alienate people.
Yeah, it's sort of like saying the standard, good, how are you doing? It doesn't really cut the mustard.
It just doesn't anymore. It doesn't anymore.
No. So before we get into it, I want to say that we have recorded this episode once before together. You made the schlep down from Hudson, New York, where you live, to record with me in Brooklyn, which is where I currently am. And we had this fantastic 1 hour and 36-minute conversation in which none of the sound recorded, and for which I have already apologized profusely, although now I'm doing it on air. And I'm just so grateful that you have so graciously agreed to do it again. And thank you for being here. And part of what we recorded in that episode, which is now with the angels and the spirits and whoever else that unrecorded episodes go to die, we touched on quite a few times this idea of kind of do-overs and second chances. And in a way, if I'm going to look at it in a poetic way, which I'm prone to do, it's testament to that, right? Like of what we talked about in this first episode of having the opportunity to do things again, and also to be able to have ongoing conversations with the people in our lives and the people we reach out to for support.
Yeah, and also the resilience to show up again is a great metaphor. You know, when life wants you dead,
exactly.
It's really, it can be hard to show up again. What if I'm going to get pied to the face again? But I think after a few pies to the face, you just realize you just got to show up. You're going to get pied eventually. So risk it. Risk the pie.
Yes. Pie to the face over and over. That's how it goes. And that's what we're both doing here anyway. So in that first episode, I also, at the very beginning, touched on how I was a good friend of your sister, Sunny, and I had also met your grandmother, your beloved Baba, and kind of invoked her name. And I would love for you to just speak a little bit about your Baba and also invoke her again, because I feel that she was such a brilliant woman, and she's so worth kind of having a little bit of her spirit in the conversation with us today. So would you just talk a little bit about Baba, and also how she informed the woman that you are today?
Sure, it's my pleasure. I invoke her spirit daily. So Baba's my mother's mother, and she was a watercolor painter and the most positive person I'd ever met in my life. And when I say positive, though, she wasn't, gaslighting or avoidant. She just woke up every day, no matter what, very excited to see what was going to happen. And so I grew up hearing things like, always look your best. You never know who you might run into. Or I wonder what's going to happen today. And she had a difficult life. She was a child of the Depression, and there were all sorts of secrets that we think she took to her grave. And there were times growing up when I'd be hanging out at her apartment on the Upper East Side on her, usually collapsed on her Oriental rugs, having a meltdown because I always felt safe having meltdowns with Bubba. You could go to Bubba's house just to have a nervous breakdown on her carpet and look up at her, apologize profusely, and she would just say, I don't care if you're laughing or crying. I'm just happy you're here. And I try to have that same kind of unconditional, send that same message to my own children who definitely have many a meltdown on our Moroccan carpet rugs. But Bubba, what I loved about her was she was so positive. She was so full of light. Everyone was drawn to her. She was so magnetic, but she did have dark stuff going on. And I remember many times walking into the living room, especially when she was older, and saying, what are you thinking about? And are you okay? You look a little blue. And she'd go, I'm just thinking about my life. So it's not that she didn't have difficult things going on. She just had a curiosity about them and she wanted to participate in them, even if they were hard. And that's something that I learned from her. I think I confuse people sometimes with my positivity because I think positivity is misunderstood. As a cancer mother, my son has now been through brain cancer twice. So we've lived at the hospital now twice. And there have always been those other mothers or parents on the hall who do not have the same outlook, who I really annoyed. But like my Bubba, I would show up even during the worst of times in my dress, put my lipstick on and try to have a better day than I'm having. And that definitely would confuse people. And I feel like it still does. I mean, I have a child who's been through cancer twice, who's still living with cancer. I myself am a recent breast cancer survivor. And you definitely run into people who look at you like you're an alien, that you're not walking around sobbing, slitting your wrists. But it's because of Bubba, and and that's why we're invoking her. It's just that spirit. And I think at the end of the day, the word warrior gets on my nerves because it's like so overused. But at the end of the day, it's a warrior spirit. It's that spirit of we're just going to keep going. We're not denying feelings. We're not denying how shitty something is, but we're going to keep going because, let's also be cheesy. Mary Oliver, it's our one precious life. What other choice do I have? I got to show up.
And I think there's a misconception around the warrior naming of people who have been through really difficult things, because people have named me a warrior in the past, and I've also put that hat on and then also taken it off. But I don't know if it has to look in the way that maybe people expect it to look. I think actually that warrior archetype can be the person also saying the cheesy Mary Oliver line, although, I'm a huge I feel like Mary Oliver is my patron saint.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I don't
Me too.
Cheesy, but
but it's like Mona Lisa. It's just been like so overused. So,
Exactly. Yes, of course. And it's also, the warrior also has lipstick on. And most times, the warrior is not that which you might imagine it to be. I love that you kind of bring that in.
Yeah, I think the warrior is complicated, and that complexity doesn't get addressed enough. So, as a cancer mother, I felt limited in terms of how people saw me. As a cancer mother, the minute your child gets a cancer diagnosis, you are immediately, as their caregiver, martyred, right? And just only seen as the selfless mother who's trying to keep their child alive. But there was so much other shit going on that was keeping me alive, right? And then as now a breast cancer survivor, we're called warriors. We're supposed to like put our sneakers on and go walk these walks. And, you're such a warrior. You lost your breast, but you just keep going. And it's like, yes, I did. And I did it as gracefully as I could. But there's a lot of complex feelings there. And it's tough when they get washed away for the convenience of other people. I actually saw something this morning on Instagram. I'm blanking on her name now. Oh, Kate Bowler, wonderful writer and she said something along the lines of, people always want to fix things. They want to talk at you when you show up with your crisis, right? When all you really need is, I forget the exact words she used, but something along the lines of just like understanding silence, like just let the warriors in your life, if they are at that day that you're with them experiencing some sort of crisis or having a hard time, let the warriors in your life just show up with all their complexity. Don't try to fix them. Just lean in and listen, because I think that's the only way we're going to learn more about who warriors are, is if we just shut the fuck up. And, like for instance, as a breast cancer survivor now, we caught it early. I lost my breast. Now I'm on hormone medication, which is causing all sorts of problems. But people always say things like, well, at least you didn't have to do chemo. Well, at least you didn't have to do radiation. And it's so insulting for someone like me, because I've been through chemo and radiation with my son. So I get that I had run of the mill, easy to treat cancer. But so my point is, people, and I didn't know how to do this, and I probably still fuck up, but I just wish people would learn the art of just witnessing and holding space. Because when you do that, you can learn how to love your warrior more. Everybody wants to love the quote unquote warriors in their life, but they don't shut the fuck up enough to actually hear what those warriors need. And my Bubba, as much as we're idolizing her, was a total chatterbox and wouldn't shut the fuck up. So that was her one fatal flaw. She didn't always listen. So I definitely am trying to fix that ancestral chatty Cathy thing.
Yes, I also have that ancestral chatty Cathy that I'm also trying to heal.
And I think the other thing is, when you've got a lot going on, when you've been a warrior, you're a real source of fascination for people. You're a source of fascination and you're a source of dread, because a dear friend who I love, who always just says it straight, she's like, Alexa, we're proof that there's no God. And that's really inconvenient for people. Now, I just want to joke, like, I do believe in a higher power, but we're proof that bad things do happen to good people. And that really fucks people's trust up. So it's like people want to be there for you, but they also don't want to catch the contagious chaos. And that's something I've been through now quite a few times. So it really leaves the warriors in a really weird situation. You end up spending a lot of time taking care of people other than yourself or the person you're caregiving, just to get through the day. And it's a burden that you can feel so ungrateful saying it. These people have fundraised for you. They've made you meals. I've had like 5 meal trains. People are so wonderful. They want to show up. But at the end of the day, there's this little pocket of space that doesn't get addressed. And that is how to really show up on a soul level for the people in your life that have been through things you can't even imagine. And don't try to imagine them. Just listen to what it feels like.
And don't try to fix or expect the person to be the person who they were before. I think that's a major thing that can come up in these sorts of situations. And I think often it's a grief for the person trying to hold space too, right? So it becomes an expectation of like, oh, you're just going to go back to normal now, right? But that's just not realistic. And it's not everyone, of course, but it can often be this sort of like, oh, you're fine now, right? Because you've gone through treatment, or you've had things have settled down and everything's going to be normal again. And so often that's just not a reality that anyone can go back, because they've been through so much.
Right. And that's another spot where people get really confused, and where you yourself, we'll keep using the warrior, even though it's kind of annoying, but the warrior themselves, I think, is very confused by this, right? So the first time my son went through treatment for brain cancer, he was 1 year old, and it was an almost year-long process. And at the end of it, during and at the end of it, I, as a new twin mother, was writing, and I was writing a record as well. When Lou was home and well, I was going to record the songs. Like I had all these projects. I applied to graduate school. I was so determined to not lose myself to the crisis, right? And I did all those things. Put my record out, went to graduate school, was featured in all these mommy blogs. Look at this amazing super mommy, and like it all felt really good, right? And then there was born my reputation as a very resilient person, right? You couldn't argue that I wasn't showing up for my family. They came first. I showed up, but I was taking care of myself as well, right? When I was in the ER on Friday night, that same loop was running through my head. You're so strong, Alexa. You can do this. You got this. And then about at like the 4-hour mark, when I was still waiting to be seen, I burst into tears. I went marching over to the nurse's station. I'm no stranger to a hospital. I knew they were not handling this right. I knew that communication should have been happening. And I allowed myself to kind of be the crazy woman in the ER. And I am a little ashamed, but I also joked with my husband, listen, I got a lot of problems. I'm not like a model human, right? But I joked with my husband, everyone else behaves so badly all the time. Why can't I? And in my experience, the people who've been through a lot of shit are the most well-behaved people because we're always trying to choose our battles. We know if we're not in the PICU with our kid or if we're not with a stage 4 diagnosis, life is good. But life's not that great when you're in the ER on a Friday night and you have something erupting in your ovary.
And also, I think I'd like to know what you think of, can we start to reframe resilience? Like for me, earlier this year, I was going through a lot of turbulent moments in terms of where I was living and what I was doing and how often I was in my car, just moving around a lot. And I remember on a long drive, like a 2.5-hour drive one day, I was like, well, what if I just leaned into this idea of being a mess? Why can't I also be a mess? And a lot of people call me resilient. A lot of people will say, you have such these deep wells of strength. And one person recently referred to me as relentless, which I picked that up more than the idea of resilience because I do keep going, but I don't necessarily feel like I have the bounce back that maybe I did at the beginning of my illness and my life even. And I think it's really important for us as people who are chronically ill, who live with disability, who are cancer survivors like yourself, to allow ourselves to be a mess, to allow yourself to be the crazy lady in the ER once in a while, because we need moments of unraveling. So with that said, if you were to reframe how resilience looked like in your being, in your soul, in your body, in your life, what would that look like for you today? And you may not have the answer for it since it's just kind of coming up right now, but yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's really difficult. Because again, you don't want to make it sound like everyone in your life isn't showing up because they are. They're all showing up.
Absolutely.
As best as they can. I mean, we have an incredible community. I've got a wonderful family. It's just that it's very hard to show that private little cave that we have in ourselves. It's the most, I think we all have that spot. It's the most private spot that nobody ever accesses. And I guess for me, reframing resilience would be, I write about this a lot as, sometimes the terrible things, I always refer to the traumas as the terrible things, right? Almost like where the wild things are. Instead of the monsters, it's the terrible things. So sometimes the terrible things will be so in the forefront of my mind when I'm with a friend that it's almost like if I open my mouth, they're going to fall into my hand and I will be forced to show this poor friend these terrible things that have fallen in my hand. I liken it to when my kids go off in the woods, they come out and they find something totally gross and they show me and I have to be like, oh, cool. It's like, I would like to reframe resilience that I can feel comfortable. showing up with my terrible things in my hand and not have people say to me, but you're used to terrible things, or you have a track record of being good with terrible things. I think it's really about being present on that very day, because you can wake up and have a day where you can walk around with those terrible things in your palm and be totally functional and be shining. Like I can have those days where I'm shining Alexa with all my terrible things. Everyone's so impressed with me, la-di, 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 right? And then I've got days where I wake up and those terrible things, it's not going very well with them. I can't be present because they're obscuring my vision. And I want to be able to say to the people in my life who want to help, I'm having a day where I can't see. And I need my inability to see to not threaten their security. It's very complicated because, you don't want, we're not picking on our beloved inner circle. It's not that, because we're all fumbling around in the dark, whether it's in our own little cave or with each other trying to hold space. So it's really like a community effort, pushing resilience more into the light. I like to think of it that way because again, you don't choose to be a resilient person. You do. You choose, like my Baba would say, you choose if you're going to wake up positive or a mess, right? And I think it's okay to choose a mess sometimes, and I'm trying to get more comfortable with that. But you don't choose these things that have happened to you. And my friend Suleika, who wrote Between Two Kingdoms, she writes about not wanting to be known for all the terrible things that have happened to you, right? But at the same time, you need to be seen through that filter, right? I talked to a friend of mine who is also, we joke we're in the cockroach club, the indestructible cockroach club, right? And I have a new friend. Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful term. I have a new friend who doesn't know my other fellow cockroach club members, but I should introduce her because she's definitely a cockroach and is going through a lot of multiple things. And we talk about all the time how, again, we don't want special privileges because we're dealing with compounded trauma. I mean, who isn't, right? But everybody's somewhere different on the scale of terrible. So it's like we don't want special privileges. We don't want special privileges, but we also need it to be acknowledged that we may not still be the girl who, 8 years ago was able to get back up again and make a record and go to graduate school. And I am dealing with that right now. Like, do I cancel these writing assignments I agreed to because I might be getting emergency surgery? I want to keep them because I want to say yes to life, right? But it's okay if I cancel them. It doesn't mean I'm betraying this resilience that everybody is holding me up to.
Yes, and it doesn't mean that more writing assignments aren't coming down the pike, right? And
right.
And more and more and more. It doesn't mean that more life isn't to be lived. And actually, since you mentioned it, just to go back to that moment in time when your son Lou, you have two sons, Lou and West, and Lou was diagnosed with a rare form of pediatric brain cancer, as you mentioned, when he was 1 year old. And you've written about it beautifully for so many years now. And you've also talked about having that diagnosis come into your life and everything having to be rejigged and wanting to hold on to that Alexa, that sort of maiden, and then stepping into the mother that was also a musician and an artist and wanted to be out in the world, and then holding these two really confusing and complicated realities. Can you talk a little bit about when he was first diagnosed and how that landed in your family's life?
I mean, it was a really dramatic, so funny because I've been trying to write essentially a memoir about all this, and I really think I overthink it because it really could just start with this. When Lou was about 10 months old, he stopped nursing and was on a steady decline. And it was easy to see he was on a decline because his brother West was not and was thriving. multiple trips to the pediatrician. Nobody knew what was going on. It was like a ticking bomb. It got to the point where he was sleeping like 15 minutes at a time and waking up screaming. And I didn't go from maiden to mother when my children were born. I was still very much in maiden. And my friend Sarah Durham Wilson just wrote a book, Maiden to Mother, which I recommend to everyone. It's not just about being a mother, but it's about sort of stepping into, this more powerful female archetype. And for me, the day that happened, I was asked to play a show. My friend Ben asked me to play a show opening for him. And even though I had a sick child with a mysterious ailment, I said yes, because in my hysteria, in my unslept hysteria, it felt so important that I play this show. And before I ran to meet a new pediatrician that morning with Lou, I put my guitar and a dress that probably didn't fit me anymore by the door, thinking I would come back, we'd work out whatever was wrong with Lou, and I would go play this show. I'm embarrassed to say this now because it makes me sound like a very selfish mother. But it was important to me. Everyone in my life agreed, sure, go play the show. It's important to you, Alexa. We'll take care of Lou, right? So I run to figure this out, to meet this new pediatrician. Usually I would take a taxi across town. And for some reason, I ran with Lou. I had him strapped to me. We ran down the subway steps. It was summer. It was just brutal. He was listless, attached to me. Subway drums are going. I mean, it was like we entered an alternate universe. And as we're waiting for the train, I see this very skinny, very gray, very bald person in a mask approach me. And I realized after he said my name that it was my friend Jonathan, who was a photographer. And he was, I mean, this is so wild how this worked. He was the last photographer when I was still actively a singer-songwriter who took my portrait for a magazine right before I was pregnant. So he took the last portrait of me as that willowy, carefree, spooky chanteuse. And I had no idea that he had been diagnosed with cancer and was going through cancer treatment. So there I am on the subway with my child. Somebody I know and love is standing before me, completely transformed. And little do I know that the minute I step on the subway and get out, I too am going to be transformed, not only from the maiden that Jonathan took the picture of to a mother, but I was also going to be granted entry to Cancer Island, an island that I had no experience with. So it was this crazy foreshadowing, bumping into Jonathan that day, right? And when I said to him my baby was sick, he panicked and said, well, I got to get out of here. And he ran up the stairs and it was so spooky. I got on the train. I Googled to make sure he was still alive. Like I was out of my mind. Did I see a ghost? Of course, now I know he was running away because he was immunocompromised and shouldn't have been around, quote unquote, sick baby. Anyway, that crazy shit happened. We get out of the subway and I walk slowly to Mount Sinai, and we saw a new pediatrician who thought to measure Lou's head, and she sent me on this wild goose chase down in the bowels of Mount Sinai, and it was this wild labyrinth. And while she did that, she sent us on that chase, she was arranging for a surgeon to meet us in ER. So when we were done with all the tests, we were spat back out onto the sidewalk, and I just remember her calling and saying, you need to come meet me in ER. And I'll never forget that moment. My legs were shaking like in a dream where you want to move, but you can't. The minute the sliding doors opened to the ER, I knew I would be walking into a new dimension. And I was. No mother ever thinks they're going to walk through the sliding door and be told that their child has a huge hemorrhaging, very difficult to remove brain tumor. But that's what I was told when I met the surgeon. And, we took it from there. Lou had brain surgery, and then we found out it was cancerous, and the initiation just continued, right? And I obviously never played that show. And I think there is a part of me that has been trying to go back to that old apartment, which is no longer my apartment. There's a part of me that still wants to go back and retrieve that bag and retrieve that guitar as though it's choose your own adventure. And I could have chosen page 6 instead of page 24. Of course, it's not that. I didn't have a choice. But there is that part of Alexa that I left behind this whole time. And I'm still trying to retrieve her. And it's not the part that never had children. It's not like, oh, I wish I never had children. None of this would have happened. It's just a part. So this is going to sound a little goofy, but I got really interested in shamanism these last few years. And I was reading all these books about, spirit loss and soul retrieval. It was very interesting to me on an intellectual level, whether or not I believed in it, because it got me thinking about the part of me that I left with the bag and the guitar. And
in the hospital.
Right. And there was two parts of me that I've left. Like I left that part of me who wanted to play the show, right? And I think I banished her. I banished her all these years because it wasn't safe for her to come back. So as an artist, there was that artist wounding of like, I need to send you away for a while because things aren't safe for these things that mean so much for your soul, music and performing. And then there was the part of me, and I was going through an initiation for which there was no room for her. I was becoming this other person, the cancer mom, the warrior. And to my surprise, when Lou was in treatment that whole time, I was in touch with Jonathan. He was going through treatment in a different hospital. We ended up losing him. And the night he died, since we're getting a little mystical, I heard him say my name. And there was such a connection there. I knew with Jonathan passing that part of me that he had captured was also gone. And thus began this new adventure of cruise ship living. That's what I called the cancer ward. It was like Love Boat. All of these families, all with the same goal, trying to keep their kid alive. It was the first time, it was the most profound experience of my life. And
can you speak a little bit to that relationship between as a caregiver, you're showing up every day for your kid, and you referred to it as Cancer Island and this idea of being on a cruise ship. And that was very much my own experience of being in the hospital too, is that it really felt like this whole universe unto itself, in which the outside world almost didn't exist, although you always kind of knew that it was out there, but you were living your own reality. What were those relationships with the other families like, the other caregivers going through a similar thing to you?
They were fascinating to me because the second one, we were in the new fancy hospital where we all had ample space, single rooms, but we never saw other families. So it was a different experience. Like that second time, it was just the lonely only club. Like I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I would leave the hospital to wander the other world just alone. But that first time, it was almost like I liken it to Girl Interrupted, or I've read a lot of memoirs about psychiatric institutions because there's a similarity there, more so than with memoirs about adults who are ill. Because I can't explain it, but there was very much like we both went to the same prep school. I was a boarding student, and there was something familiar to the 9th floor at the hospital to me. And I think it was a mix of what it was like going to boarding school and living with 30 other girls and just being up in each other's shit, right? And then this other wild, almost psychiatric institutional experience, because as caregivers, we were forced to live, sleep, and eat on this floor where we got zero sleep, where we were constantly being woken up by beeping emergencies, and where we were expected to be on our best and be on the lookout like tigers for our kids' well-being. So it was sort of an impossible ask. And there was a whole gang of us the first time. There was my friend Maria, who was younger than me. She was from Brooklyn, born and raised in Bensonhurst. I love Maria so much. We had nothing in common. We had no idea anything about the other, except that every night after our kids went to sleep, we'd meet in the hallway and share this common wound. And there were a few other parents there that would meet with us. And what was so strange about it was we needed each other, but we didn't really get to know each other than the present, what we were dealing with in that moment. And fascinating to me were the different ways in which we were all coping. We would show up for each other, but we all had crazy shit going on to help us survive privately. So, for instance, I had my own shit going on when I would leave the island, certain relationships, certain friendships, certain stuff I was up to just to survive. There was a mother who had a shoplifting problem. We all knew it. There was the dad whose wife couldn't handle it. But wasn't there something going on with him and the nurse? Like, so there was just, it was like a soap opera, right? But we never talked about those things. But I'm fascinated by those things, the things that we had to do. I brought Lou recently for some routine tests to the clinic. And this dad I'm talking about was there with his daughter. And I haven't seen him since this first hospitalization. And we looked at each other. I kept looking at him. He looked so familiar. And he was looking at me and I was looking at his daughter. And then it dawned on me when I left, oh my God, it was the dad whose wife couldn't handle it. And I was remembering how we all had such a fascination with him, because who was this mother who couldn't handle it? Did we secretly envy her? She had the gall to not show up for her kid, right? But my point of my rambling story is, when I saw him, my face turned red and I got nervous, almost the way you would get, and I know this is going to sound crazy, almost the way you get if you run into someone you slept with once, okay? And I couldn't quite put it together, but it's because he had seen me at my most raw. This was the same dad who came running when I was screaming, when my child disconnected his port and there was blood spilling everywhere. He stood in the doorway and then Maria showed up and I stood there with my hands outstretched, showing them my terrible thing. So it's just wild. I get goosebumps thinking about that. I don't know his name. I don't know. I'm happy his child is still with us. But, oh, I got goosebumps just seeing him that day, because it put me right back there on the 9th floor. And maybe getting back to what we were talking about, like, how do I show up for the people who want to love and take care of me in my life? How do I open the door and scream like that?
Yeah. How do you take off all your clothes? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you, like, if it's, likening it to running into someone that you've slept with, that dad saw you metaphorically naked in this
100%.
state that you just aren't in when you're walking in through the world. And yeah. I think we would do well to kind of show everyone those other parts of ourselves, because it's almost sacred.
It absolutely. I didn't know what to say when I saw him, but there was a part of me that just, I was filled with so much gratitude. It's almost like I'm fascinated listening to war veterans talk about, their bonds. My own grandfather had Bubba's husband, Bora. He was a war hero, and he had this best friend that he would always talk about. And I remember as a child being fascinated with, who is this best friend that he survived the camps with and escaped. And that's how I feel about this dad and Maria.
They're big features in our lives, especially when you've gone through a hospital experience. They're these big characters. And then it's so interesting as time passes. It's definitely been true for myself that, the nurse who was there every single day with me, the janitor, the the other transplant recipient who was my roommate for a time. And yet I've not seen any of them for many years. And if I were to see them, what would that feel like? Because it was, and I have run into some people who feature largely in my own narrative and my own story of my time in the hospital. And it always does feel a little bit exposing in a way, but also very, there's like no other relationship like it. There's no other sort of, there's no, I can't think of a better word than relationship, although it's not the type of relationship that we think of.
But
you know, we don't text each other. We don't call each other. Yeah.
They're minor, major characters. I think we've talked about this. I've written about that first treatment. There was a barista at the cafe nearby. And my only relief every day was going to this cafe and getting my coffee. And, you know, he was bearded and tattooed and he was playing Neil Young. And it felt like I would walk into my former life every time I went to get the latte every morning. And he's a great example because he didn't know my story. Yet every morning we would look at each other and there was some sort of something that glued us together. Years later, my friend Latanya was having a tag sale and he walks up with his pregnant wife or partner. And I hid very quickly under the folding table and pretended to be like organizing clothes. And when he left, Latanya looks at me and she goes, "Who was that? You totally slept with him." And I was like, "No, you don't understand." But it was the same thing. It was no, but that person saw me more naked than I've ever been. So you're so right. It's these minor, major characters that are so important to you because they color your story. They color your narrative. And they're reminders that, you know, seeing the dad whose wife couldn't handle it, seeing him at the clinic validated my memory. It reminded me, Alexa, that did happen. That year on the 9th floor did happen. And I know, talking to myself here, I know you're having trouble writing about it, but it did happen. And he's there and his daughter is somehow still alive and your son is somehow still alive and you're both somehow still alive.
Speaking of somehow still alive, how is Lou doing now and how is West also doing?
Lou's doing great. I mean, he is thriving. He, you know, he's not in remission. It's kind of a complicated situation. His brain is clear, but he does have lesions on his spine. And as long as they stay asleep and everything stays clear, he'll be okay. But we had a tough year with Lou. It was his first year back in school full time because we had homeschooled with a pod during the pandemic. And we had been told, so that the second time around in the hospital, which was a totally different experience, and the fancy new hospital where I had no one to talk to, I remember the nerdy proton radiation guy came to speak to me before Lou did radiation and basically told me all the things that could happen to him down the road if we did this treatment, just to let me know. It's like, okay, thank you. You know, learning disabilities, problems with attention, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, Lou's back in school. We were just so excited that he's back in school like a normal person. And it was just one thing after another. And I think a lot of it was just like me. Lou had to reassimilate into society, in his case, a classroom of 30 other kids. So a lot of it was learning how to resocialize after all that time. But a big piece of the puzzle that we didn't know until we got all this testing done was that the radiation and the chemo had indeed damaged his brain. He is a brilliant little boy, but he's considered to have a traumatic brain injury. And everything he went through created something called mild neurocognitive disorder, which means that he has trouble with short-term memory processing. He gets brain fatigue and needs breaks. So all of this came to light. And suddenly we realized the reason he was having like disciplinary issues was that he couldn't keep up. He couldn't focus. And it was his way of getting the attention he needed, poor little thing. So it was a tough year, but he was clever. I mean, it's very clever to be mean to your friends because you know that if you are, the teacher will take you aside and you can rest your brain. But also such an example of what we're talking about, like Lou's so resilient, Lou's so amazing. Lou was having a hard time and nobody was making space for it, you know? So, and then West, it was hard for West to be at school being like, my brother gets in trouble all the time. First of all, it's hard to be the shy, reserved sibling of an eccentric, outspoken lunatic like Lou. I say that with love. It's already difficult. But then to have to stand up for his brother at school, like my heart broke when West walked in on my husband Ian and I having a conversation. We were going over the results from Lou's neurocognitive feedback evaluation or evaluation feedback. And we try to keep, not involve the children, obviously, but West walked in and he had overheard what we were saying. And so he wanted an explanation. I could tell he was worried. I said, oh, no. Your brother's just had some testing because he's having trouble learning at school. So we want to get him the support that he needs. And he goes, well, what's wrong with him? And I am not one to bullshit my kids. I don't want to put stuff on them that's too advanced for them. But I also know to bullshit them is a disservice. So I said, listen, Lou's had a lot of treatment. It can affect your brain. His brain works a little differently than other people. And that's why he was having problems with his friends. And Wes looks at me and he goes, well, you need to tell his friends. You need to tell everybody. He was saying, everyone needs to know this so they can understand him. And I was just so blown away. Now imagine if I had, and Wes is, a 9-year-old little boy, we're talking about me as a warrior or whatever. I wish I had a West on my shoulder saying, you need to tell everyone, Alexa, that you suffer from crippling anxiety, that you're not able to show up sometimes, that it just shows that kids sometimes are just so far ahead.
So far advanced from the rest of us. I mean, even as you were saying that and telling me that, tears come to my eyes because it's the brilliance of West to know his brother so well that he knows that that's the right thing, most likely for him and for everyone else to know these things. And I think the reason why I find it so touching is that, like you say, in the adult world, we don't feel like we always can show all the parts of ourselves or
advocate,
whether it's the anxiety. Mm-hmm. Yes, or advocate for ourselves and let everyone know what we need in a certain moment.
Yeah. Well, I think West was also telling us, you need to tell everyone because I can't shoulder this burden at school anymore, which was huge. But I think it's a great example. I think Lou is a kid that really confused everyone, just like I feel like I confuse people sometimes. I got the nice dress on. I put the lipstick on. I show up. I'm always happy to be where I am. I'm very friendly. I'm very giggly, just like Bubba, right? But there's all this shit going on. And so it can be confusing. Lou shows up, super fun, super entertaining, and then kind of dicky to his friends and getting into these social messes because has anxiety and doesn't know what's going on with his brain. So it's just, it bonded me with my kids these last couple of months. And I think we can use Lou's, neuropsych evaluation and his diagnoses in that area almost as metaphor for all this other shit. And I thought that when we went back to the clinic to get these tests for him, and we got these tests just to clarify for readers, does he need special education help? People don't understand this. They think that when a kid is done with chemo, and the cancer's gone, that it's over. It's not over. Cancer families are still dealing with bullshit years after because a child is still growing and evolving. So there's more damage done to them just as much as they're more resilient because they're still growing. So it's like a double-edged situation. That really sucked. But when we were at the clinic and the psychologist was explaining to me, he may need special education help. He'll always need accommodations made for him. And again, this isn't an intelligence thing. It's just a focus. And as she was saying that, I was like, in my head, what accommodations do I need to make for myself? And I felt guilty saying that, but it's along the lines of what we're saying. Like, I have never granted myself accommodations. And they can be as simple as saying no to certain social gatherings or letting people know I'm having PTSD today and I can't come. And it doesn't mean that I'm not showing up as a warrior.
It's a lot. And originally, when I reached out to you to come on the show, I wanted to get the perspective of a caregiver and what it's like to be the mother of a sick child and to be a cancer family. And you've written about it so beautifully for so long. You started with the hashtag alchemical cancer mom years ago, which I followed for a long time. And then last year, speaking of terrible things, you were diagnosed with breast cancer yourself, which you touched on earlier. I wondered if you would read what you wrote when you shared it. And I know that you've sort of gone through probably 5 lifetimes since you wrote that announcement, but if you would just read it for us and give us a sense of where you were at when you had been diagnosed and gone through the treatment.
Sure. And I think it's worth noting that I didn't know how to tell people that another terrible thing had happened. Like, and I got to tell you, people didn't do very well with this. Like, it's just so interesting. It shows how much you're loved, right? My favorite response was, "This should be illegal." Like, and again, I'm not trying to be a show off. Look at me. Now I got cancer. Like, I mean, it's not that. It's just, I didn't know how to show up because I already was known for these terrible things. And then this other one comes just out of nowhere. And I just want to share that I handed the correspondence over to a dear friend of mine. She had been in a car accident after having major surgery for something else. And I had said to her, there is no way you should be handling the quote unquote press release about your current situation. So please let me do it. And it ended up really working. I became her like point of contact. And I had done that before when Lou was in treatment. So when this happened, that friend said, "I got this, just send me the emails." So if anyone's listening and they want to help somebody going through a terrible thing, just like being the terrible thing publicist for a friend, if this is your forte, is a wonderful thing to do.
It's amazing. I had a dragon myself. I had a couple. And it's not for the faint-hearted, but it is really, really welcome. It's really welcome.
They're the ones
and needed.
That can update the friends, and this is where you can get groceries for them. This is the meal train. So anyway, yeah, I'm so glad you had friends like that too. But I don't have a huge following, but I have a modest following of very devoted, wonderful people. So I did. A friend said to me, "You don't have to tell anyone." And that almost made me feel ashamed. Like, I'm not like dying to tell the world that I have to lose my breast. But I also cannot go through this world without people knowing that this new layer has fallen. And there's now yet another scrim in front of me. So anyway, here's the post. "I have some news. I had breast cancer. I lost my breast. It all happened really, really fast, 8 weeks. We caught it just in time, early enough, and I'm cancer-free now. It was a plot twist I never considered. Cancer mom gets cancer? No good editor would allow that. But here I am, one-breasted, in bed, and really missing my friends. People said, you don't have to tell anyone, but it started to feel like I was hiding, and that hurt more than the gash where my breast used to be. I'm so grateful for my family and friends who hopped to, wilding what the fucking fuck was the unanimous reaction, and got us through this in the middle of Omicron, school closures, snowstorms. Yes, I'm tired of terrible things, but grace, courage, and a sense of humor always show up at the last minute. It's a bright-eyed miracle I've come to rely on, especially when I feel like I have nothing left."
Similarly to your friends, when I saw that, I thought, what the fucking fuck? Since we have this personal connection, and also I felt such a kinship with you over the years through your writing and just having similar hospital stories. How are you feeling now in regards to what you just read out and what you wrote about it? And also with the knowledge that you were in the ER on Friday night, which you so openly offered us at the beginning of the episode. How are you making sense of something that's completely nonsensical?
I mean, it's a daily practice, right? When I tell the story, I understand why people get nauseous. I get nauseous. Like, cancer mom gets cancer? Like, I've never met anyone who this has happened to. If you know anyone, if anyone out there is in the same situation, please let me know. I'm not a support group type at all. Oh my God, no. I'm definitely like allergic to clubs and support groups. I wish I wasn't. But it would be awesome to meet somebody who went from caregiver to patient. Because when you go from caregiver to patient, you are actively re-traumatized. I didn't understand that I was actively being re-traumatized until much later. And reading what I just read, yeah, I mean, I've since had reconstruction surgery. I have a new breast, but there's still that gash there. Just like, oh, let's bring this home. Just like I left the dress and the guitar by the door, the woman with the gash in her chest, we have yet to really have a conversation. It was such a violence. It was such a save my life. But I think it upset people also because I was a performer. I'm known as someone showing up. It's an awful violence to happen to anyone, but I think just for me and my personality, it was very confusing. And right now I'm talking about others. But for me, myself, looking in the mirror, it was something I couldn't process, and I still have yet to process. I have a body that is very strong. It never gets sick. It could go nights without sleeping at the hospital with Lou. It has withstood a lot. And over the last couple of years, all sorts of shit started happening. I was in the ER a lot, like migraines, and I had like all this stuff started happening. And it was a reminder that we warriors do have our limits. And I am not saying I gave myself breast cancer. I do not believe at all that we give ourselves disease. And there are definitely people in my life who I wanted to throw darts at who were like, well, I'm not surprised you got it. And I was like, huh? Like, another example of silence holding space would have worked better. But people don't know what to say. Yeah. Like, they thought that would somehow make me feel better. An example of what not to say. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. So you're saying I did trauma wrong and got punished and had to give my breast to the gods of you fucked up? I mean, but
oh, this is my fault. Okay, cool.
Oh, okay, great. Like, I didn't do stress relief enough. Like, I didn't, get enough massages or something. Where am I with it? I don't know. It's a new thing. It's, again, I was so hell-bent on, I have easy breast cancer. They're going to take the breast. It's probably not coming back. I don't have to do chemo and radiation. I know how bad cancer can be because of my son having a rare form that nobody knows what the fuck to do with. So I am lucky. Let's just do what I'm told and move on. I'll take this pill every day. We're done. So I tried doing that. And then, the last couple of months, I've been having issues with the hormone meds and feels like such a failure. But I know that it's my body and my spirit saying, Alexa, you have to sit with the girl who's got the gash in her chest and just get to know her. What does she need? We don't have to make her pretty again. Even though she's got a new breast, even though she's got some new dresses that fit the new breasts, she's got a gash in her chest and she hurts, and maybe spend some time with her. So that's where I am with it.
How has it been for you as a family having these two cancer diagnoses?
I mean, again, West is the one I feel the worst for. Like, he looked at me shortly after we explained the situation. It was very hard. We needed a lot of help from Lou's team and psychologists and therapists. And they just said, you need to be honest, but you need to explain that this is different than Lou. Explain. So I think I had to, in a way, play up this is easy cancer in order to keep my children safe, because to have your mother knocked down is a big deal. You know, and West said to me shortly after my diagnosis, so does everyone just get cancer? And my heart just, he's probably wondering, am I going to get cancer? Is daddy going to get cancer? And I had to explain, no, bodies have problems sometimes. And that's why we're lucky to have good doctors who can solve the problems. And you're safe. But that felt like bullshit in a way, because I don't know. I don't know if we're safe, right? So it's been tough. Lou had the funniest reaction. He was pissed off that he had to share the cancer crown with me. Like there was a day that I had an appointment and he had a scan, and I was like, oh, we'll just go together. And he was like, this is my special day with daddy. Daddy takes me to my scans. Like, we're dropping you off and nothing is getting in the way of my Dunkin' Donut trip that I do every time I have a scan. It was so funny. I'm like, sorry, I have cancer too. You know, but recently he's said things like, I don't know how it's come up, but he says things like, you know, mommy and I have had a lot of time at hospitals, haven't we? Or so I think he's come around and connecting, but it is West I worry about the most. But as a family, I mean, we're exhausted. People don't understand that cancer is a full-time job. And if you're also trying to hold down a job and raise a family and figure out what's for dinner and remember to bring rain gear to school and sign permission slips, and it's like head explosion emoji, right? But we're managing. We're getting there. We're getting there. Cancer is very secretive. You know, you hear that someone gets sick, they disappear for a while. You see pictures of them bald. They look terrible. They hopefully recover. Everyone has fundraised for them and done all these lovely things. And then they're back out in the world, hopefully. And everyone's happy that they're back to normal. But what the fuck happened? What happened behind those doors? What happened with the people taking care of them? That was what I was interested in. Maria, the dad whose wife couldn't handle it, like, where do they go? Where do all these people go? How do I share this? And so that's what I decided to do. And I was so exhausted, I didn't really think about it very much. It was good for my writing. It was good for me. And it did bring me into community with a lot of really interesting people. But now I don't feel the urge to share in real time publicly. It's been harder for me. I have been saying yes to some writing assignments that have nothing to do with my story, which I think has been good for me. I've been doing some travel writing, which pieces will come out soon. I'm excited to share. It's been nice to write about other things, and by writing about those things, getting a better sense of what it is I really want to write about when it comes to the terrible things, because they're still in my hand. They're still in my head. They're still in my heart. Maria and the dad, and I don't know what to do with them all, but they're going to come out eventually. And I'm glad that I planted those seeds for myself on Instagram by sharing it, because if anything, it's a treasure trove as a writer to have all those journal entries. And it was my hope that posting my experience with Lou could help others too, because maybe there were people who didn't have the Maria and the dad, his wife couldn't handle it, standing in the doorway supporting them. So I was hoping that I could be someone's Maria by sharing that. But I don't know. I'm in a place where I've had to acknowledge to myself that I need to straighten my health out before I can really sit down with a big project. And that project's there. It's on the tip of my tongue.
And it'll be there for you when you're ready to do it.
100%. And we can't force these things. And you have people around you who are just like so excited to support you and your book. And it's wonderful, but it's very hard even to say to those people, I can't I can't give you my story when it's right here. It's still in my face. I do know that I feel better when I read things that resonate with me, and they're not necessarily cancer stories. As I said, like Girl Interrupted was a very important book for me. There are some other random memoirs and books that spoke to me in a way that I needed to be spoken to that had nothing to do with pediatric cancer. And I guess my goal is, when I'm ready, to write the book that will help someone, that'll make you want to rip a page out and tack it to your wall.
That's a perfect comment for you to make, because you've written about Joy Harjo's Crazy Brave.
Yeah.
Who is one of my favorite poets. And you have her afterword actually pinned on your wall. And many blessings for your own book to be that person's Joy Harjo's one day.
Can only hope, my God.
Would you read that excerpt for us?
Yeah, sure. Crazy Brave was sent to me by a cancer mom who I've never met, but who's become a dear friend on Instagram. And we graduated to texting and phone calls, which is nice. But she sent me Crazy Brave when Lou was diagnosed again. And it's Joy Harjo is a Native American. She's a poet laureate of the US. Our experiences are completely different. I'm a white cancer mom in New York City. But she touched upon that space I'm talking about, that private space that is universal. So this is the afterword from Joy Harjo's Crazy Brave. The panic followed me for many years. In the beginning, it almost took my life. Like a comet hurtling on a journey through a sky path, I lost particles and let go of that which did not support me. One winter dusk 30 years later, I paddled an outrigger canoe in deep turquoise waters off the shore of Mauna Bay on the beloved island of Oahu in the Hawaiian Islands. I noticed how my thoughts had become like waves, rising and falling without urgency or anxiety to them. And I realized that I had let go of the remnant tentacles of panic that had been planted in me years ago when I was a young mother lost in the middle of traffic. I let it go. I let it go in beauty, with love, in the spirit of aloha or compassion. I let my thoughts of forgiveness for myself and for others in the story follow the waves of the ocean in prayer.
So, Alexa, what does it look like for you to let go of the panic today, in this moment, even if it's just for a moment?
It's to know that you can let go of that story. I think that's what I love the most about that passage. There's a picture of me literally in traffic in the middle of a construction zone with my two little boys shortly after we got out of treatment the first time. We look so out of place in this construction zone. So when I read that Joy Harjo for the first time, I immediately thought of that picture of myself and my children. And that's the state. That's the state you want to let go of. I want to let go of what happened and how I felt. And so I remind myself that one day it is possible that I will be lying in the waves somewhere, held by the ocean, and realize that I'm not tormented by that image anymore. So I think that's bringing it back to Bubba, right? Like, wake up every day, she always said, because you never know what's going to happen. She also used to say, it won't be so bad tomorrow. Now, we all know sometimes you need to wait like way too many tomorrows, but I do know she's right, because the more the time goes on, sometimes the more time goes on, the more we hurt because stuff just comes out and we can't control that timeline, right? But at the same time, we get separation. And I think that my goal on a daily basis is to honor the hope that swim, that floating in the waves, that release is possible. Here's an example. I mean, just last night I was a survivor in my bio. Maybe I should. That way people will know, and maybe we should connect, or I don't know what else. And then I was like, no, I don't want it there. And that was an interesting moment for me. This is like stupid Instagram, right? But
no, I love that. I have done that
can
many a
I?
time, and I've had liver transplant recipient and deleted
Right.
it and put it back and deleted it.
Right. And it's like,
So
exactly.
it speaks to that, like, well, we don't want it to be the whole of our identity, or at least for myself, I don't want it to be the whole of my identity, but I also, it's such an important part of who I am. And, you know,
Yeah.
I so know what you're talking about in terms of like this identity piece where we want to be seen, going back to that, like we want to be seen in the entirety of our experience, but also don't boil me down to this one thing.
Because, yes, exactly. And I think there's a reason, you get me talking, I'll go on, right, about Maria and the ninth floor, because it's similar to war veterans or older people. Like, you want to forget, but if you don't tell it, will it disappear? And does it mean it didn't happen? It's very
Mm.
complicated. A teacher of Lou's, when he was first in school, when he was really little, she wasn't thinking, and she said to me, I was talking about our experience, and she goes, you can let that go now. And I felt so shamed. Like, Alexa, just let him be a normal nursery schooler and let it go. It was the wrong thing to say. She didn't mean to be a jerk, but you can't dictate when you're ready to let something go. You can't dictate the degree to which you need to let it go. And I think it's okay if it comes in and out of your bio, metaphorically, and like it can come in and out depending on where you are. Like today, I don't want that shit in my bio.
Yeah, exactly. And if one day you want to be picking up that maiden by the guitar and hanging out with her a bit, and then the next day you're back to Alexa in 2022, spending time with both those people is okay and
Yeah.
normal, right? It's like it's even welcome. I think all the versions of ourselves are welcome here.
100%. Yes, yes. And welcomed. And maybe that's what I want in terms of rewriting what resilience means and how to show up. Maybe actually, Nora, it's what you just said. Maybe it's permission to show up with like all those people. Those like little cutout paper chains, like you do a figure and then it's like a chain of
Yeah.
figures. Like I feel like I'm really hitting it with metaphors today, but we
Yeah.
all can expand like that. We have so many different people in us, and it's very hard sometimes for us as humans to see enough to show all those sides, because it's a disservice to everyone when you don't show them, and it's a disservice when you won't see them.
So we're coming to the end of our time together, and I wondered whether you would take us out with 3 questions that I always ask my guests. The first one is, if you lived in a world that completely catered to being a cancer family, what would that look like?
It would be a world in which there were no questions asked when you asked for help. One of the most difficult things was having to fundraise. And I know a lot of families do GoFundMes when they go through cancer. And I've never been more hurt in my life than when a family member wanted me to break down exactly what they were paying for. That's just an example of, what when we had in the GoFundMe, we explained why I couldn't work, right? But that's an example of the ignorance that we have. We don't understand what it means to be a cancer family, to lose an income, even if you have insurance. Imagine how much worse it is if you don't. But no questions asked. Like that teacher who said, "Why can't you get over this?" Well, I can't. Can you accept me? So I think it's really, the more we share these stories, these closed door experiences, I think we can build a better world for cancer families, for anybody who's living a different kind of life.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then what's one phrase or saying that you always come back to?
I mean, I always apologize for it because it sounds a little weird, but I always say to myself, and I don't know if I made this up or if I stole it from someone else, so I'm not going to quote anyone or myself. Right now is the safest place to be. Now, sometimes we're not safe, obviously, but when I start really panicking and worrying, oh my God, my ovarian cyst is going to rupture. Oh my God, Lou's going to have a bad scan. Oh my God, I start like spiraling out. I go, stop. You're safe. You're breathing. You're talking to Nora. You're going to have some lunch. Right now, safest place to be. Stay here. And it's a very, Buddhist thing. Mm-hmm. Just be here now. It's very hard to be here now. You have to remind yourself. And I've had to say that to myself even when Lou was like vomiting into buckets and the beeps are going and everything's crazy. Right now we're breathing. We're here. When I start worrying about his mortality, my mortality, I'm here right now. He's here right now.
There's so much wisdom in that because in somatics, which I'm quite familiar with, a way to ground yourself is by just reminding your body that it's there. And that's so similar to that. Right now is the safest place to be because we're with ourselves in this moment. And no matter what's happening around us, you still can anchor yourself.
100%. And I did that when I waltzed into the operating room to remove my breast. Like it was, I think, my finest moment. I was so scared and something just overtook me. And I walked in like I was Bubba at a party. I'm here. Let's do this. And they looked at me like I was crazy. But if you can get to that, if you can get to that beautiful place, and listen, I don't get there all the time. I don't think I've been there since that day, but we are capable of that place.
Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes you show up fully for that. And then sometimes I'm so impressed with myself and how I'm showing up. And then other times I'm crumpled.
Other times
in a ball on the floor, and that's okay.
Right. Other times you're the crazy lady in the ER. It's just what it is.
Exactly. And then Alexa, finally, what's one thing you do to keep yourself creative each day?
I mean, it's cheesy, but not cheesy. It's just I write when I wake up. I do 3 pages every morning. When I was a girl, my mom was doing Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And I remember asking her what she was doing. She said, I'm doing my morning pages. And it's something that I've done since I was a little girl, even if it's scribble. Sometimes I'll like look up my horoscope and just copy down what it says from my phone. But as long as I've got a pen to the paper, it's a reminder that it's always there for me. Even if I don't have a lot to say, or even if what I have to say is really boring and pathetic, it's there. And I think, the hope is getting back to our thesis, I feel like today is like, how can we show up to the world in all of our mess? I can do it with my journal every morning. So if I can do it there, maybe I can do it with a mom friend at school or the teachers or my doctor or that poor nurse who had to deal with me on Friday night,
Yeah. We are big fans of morning pages over here. And I actually have a similar story with my own mother. And
amazing.
Sometimes I just write nothing. Yeah. I mean, I can't even look at what I wrote in the pandemic. It was just so much complaining, the early days of the pandemic. I was just like, I still haven't left my house. It's been 10 weeks.
Yeah, I
know. But as long as you get through those 3 pages, I feel like it feels very victorious.
100%.
And it's such a wonderful thing. So you completed the amazing 100-day creativity project that Suleika Jawad, who you mentioned earlier, the author of Between Two Kingdoms, that she started earlier in the summer, which I also attempted. And because I guess I was so busy with the morning pages, I didn't actually finish. But you finished writing a haiku a day. So you wrote 100 haikus.
I did.
And I loved so many of them.
Aww.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you would be so kind as to take us out today by reading one of them.
Sure. Suleika's 100-day project was just so wonderful. It connected so many people, and she's just amazing. She's a new friend, and I think part of my being so committed to the project was I just wanted to rally for her, because if she was showing up every day, I could too. Love you, Suleika. Let's do this one. Oh, resilience. Stretchy like silly putty, the day collapses. Everyone is so impressed, but I hold hundreds of collapsing days in the pocket of well-worn dresses, strewn flowers. What a big old mess.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect for our resilience episode. Well, thank you so much for showing up today. Thank you for being here in your resilience, in your brokenness, and all your majesty. I so look forward to this continued conversation that we will hopefully have for lifetimes to come.
Absolutely, Nora, and I'm full of admiration for you. So this was my pleasure. Thank you.
That was our show, So Life Wants You Dead. Thanks so much for listening. You can engage with Alexa Wilding's work on her Instagram at Alexa Wilding, where she writes about love, resilience, and the terrible things. Alexa is currently working on a memoir about her experience on Cancer Island, so look out for that. You can also find her information in our show notes. This episode was made in collaboration with and support from Soho House. Many thanks to Jamila Brown, Min Shrimpton, Olivier Garrity, Sagal Mohammed, Erica Bonet, and Theo Vanderbroeke. Our illustrations are by the extremely talented Renee Fagan. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe, leave us a review, or rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It's slightly contested according to the internet, but I believe it's Dorothy Parker who said, "If you don't have anything nice to say, come sit by me." In this particular case, that doesn't apply. If you don't have anything nice to say, please go sit somewhere else. Rating us and subscribing really makes a difference. You can find us on Instagram at So Life Wants You Dead, where we talk all things illness, death, disability, and creativity. Thank you so much for being here, and see you next time.